Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movie Studio. Today we are here for the 17th episode of the Undead Talk podcast. We're going to be talking about The Walking Dead Season 4, episodes 10, 11, and 12. And my dad is here to join me. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, everybody. You're welcome, man.
What did you think of these three episodes overall and like the second half of the season so far?
Well, these episodes are different. I think we acknowledge that once the prison was left and they moved out individually in groups and things like that, the story was going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it. I think slowing it down, taking a look at the characters, taking a look at the trauma, I think really gives us an inside look on how they're feeling. So I'm enjoying it. It's different, but how about you? What do you think?
I think these three episodes, especially I think the first one was probably my favorite of the three. I think they all had good moments, definitely slower than the first half of the season, which really felt like bang, 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 bang all the way through. And now they're definitely like slowing things down a bit, which isn't a bad thing. I do think it's better than like the second half of last season because I gave you a point, which was the second half of season 3 had like most of the characters separated, but for no good reason. Well, now they're all separated, but it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Mm-hmm. So let's just kick off with episode 10 called Inmates. It says Beth and Daryl search for survivors of the prison attack. Tyrese meets a father and son who tell him about a place of refuge called Terminus. Now, the Tyrese storyline, like, that's kind of like not, I mean, that is what happened, but like, you would read that and you would not think what would actually end up happening with, because really it was just the father who told him about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it starts off with Beth being upset with Daryl. Daryl's very closed off. He's not really talking, and Beth insists that they go and find the other survivors. Obviously they're both grieving in their own ways, but Beth believes in hope. That's something Herschel always believed in. But Daryl is just very, very closed off, just doesn't want to talk. But we didn't get much of them in this episode. A lot of what happened with them was in the third episode we'll talk about. But we have Beth crying. She finds like shoes of one of the kids they had with them or something at the prison, and she realizes that they died, and she breaks down. And that's also, she's grieving too with everything that happened with her father. And Daryl like is like watching on. He does have like a look of regret. You can tell. But I would say out of like all the plot lines, this was like had like the least development.
Sure.
But what do you think of them?
Well, I think you're right. As far as Beth having influence of Herschel being more hopeful, and Daryl, his upbringing was definitely more negative, and so there's a cynical element to Daryl's thoughts on everything. It's like everything is going downhill, and it has been since day one. He's not necessarily recognizing the change within, and Beth helps him with that, discover it and move forward from that. But you see two different outlooks on life when you're seeing Beth and Daryl, and that's what makes them a great combo in this part of the season.
Yeah, for sure. So the other plot line, we have Tyrese, Judith, Lizzie, and Mika, and they're all out on their own in the woods. And Lizzie is just a psycho. Like, she covers Judith's mouth with her hand to get her to stop crying. What did you think of that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. She is definitely traumatized, and she's acting out of that trauma, which makes her appear crazy. But she has issues.
No, I guess both of the girls did lose their father.
Correct.
And Carol told them they were weak. So I do think it makes sense, I guess.
Yep.
But like, it's hard to watch stuff like that happen. I think Mika is definitely, I think, normal. Like, it seems she's just scared, and she feels like probably like second fiddle to Lizzie in a way, because Lizzie is so
over the top.
Yeah, over the top. That's just very hard. Two little girls that should not have had to go through these things, and yet here they are put in this situation. It's just very hard. I feel bad for both of them.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have Tyrese, and he sees a father and son, and they're fighting off walkers. So he jumps in to help. The son dies like pretty much right away, and then the father gets bitten, but right before the father dies, he tells them like there's this place called Terminus, like up the tracks or something.
Yeah, and
Um,
right then you know this is the next destination.
mhm.
Somehow all these characters and all these different plot lines are going to end up moving towards Terminus.
Yeah,
And it makes sense. There's always going to be another refuge, shelter,
yeah.
whether it's true or not. That's the hope. And so now they're moving onward to that place called
Well,
Terminus.
they're setting up for I think everyone to make it back to or make it to Terminus,
Correct.
all the shared destination. Now, whether everyone gets there, we don't know.
Right.
It's very possible one of these groups might not make it there.
Right.
Um, but we have Carol returning, and this was kind of a shock, but not really because I knew she would come back. But I wonder, like, where was she? Like, was she just hiding somewhere, and then she just happened to come across? It was pretty convenient that she just appeared out of nowhere with the girls.
Yeah, and I really didn't think about that, Micah. That's a good call out. For me, it was like the writers. Who are you going to pair Carol with in this post prison timeline? And I think it's interesting that they chose Tyrese since Carol was the one who burned up Karen, was it?
Yeah, Karen.
And so therefore, there's this built-in tension. Tyrese doesn't know that about Carol, and so Carol does know, uh, the relationship that Karen had with Tyrese. So it's just interesting that they put those two together. I'm curious about how that relationship's going to develop moving forward.
Me too. I do think Tyrese is going to learn about it, and Carol's going to tell him. That's my guess, because why else would they pair those two together?
Great.
But I also think there's going to be something with Lizzie and Mika, like something bigger that will come about.
Mm-hmm.
But it does end with them walking into Terminus, so they're like the first group to make it there.
Correct.
Um, so the next plot line is Maggie, Sasha, and Bob, and they're all out on their own, and they're searching for that bus that they think Glenn was in, because that's the last time we saw him was on that bus, from episode 8. Maggie is very like hopeless. She just doesn't think they're gonna find Glenn, but she's still like just trying to hold out on that hope, just like Herschel did. That just shows like the connection between the Green sisters throughout all of this.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a determination that she has. I mean,
mhm,
even though it doesn't look good, she's still moving forward.
mhm,
But you're right. There's the continual effect of Herschel and all of this.
mhm. Yeah. Sasha is pretty negative. She thinks that Tyrese is dead.
Great.
Um, so this is like a very different Sasha. I mean, but then again, like we still don't know that much about her. So I don't think it's like come out of like left field necessarily. I mean, I think it would probably be pretty typical, like in this situation, to like have lost hope.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Bob is kind of like flirting with Sasha. You can tell he
Mm-hmm.
has like this grin every time he looks at her. So
Mm-hmm.
it seems like maybe they're kind of setting up for a potential relationship there, maybe.
Potential relationship or potential disappointment and reaction. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that.
Well, I mean, I think it's a one-sided thing,
Yeah,
is my
yeah.
guess. I
Well,
don't
that
think.
was my
Yeah,
point. Is like,
yeah,
well, maybe Bob will like her, she won't like him, and it'll cause Bob to do something.
yeah.
Because we know he's an alcoholic. So
Hmm. Um, this trio. I mean, I think I don't think. I mean, Maggie, is kind of doing her own thing. Sasha and Bob are just helping her. I think it makes sense overall. No, like specific big connection just between the three of them. Of course, that might like develop
mm-hmm.
in future. But they do reach the bus, and they all work together to kill all the walkers in it. And then Maggie goes in because all the people are dead. Maggie goes in and searches for Glenn and is relieved when she doesn't find him. I thought the actress who plays Maggie did a great job of like that happy crying in that scene, like the
Yeah,
relief, being
yeah,
relieved
I
and
think
all
she's a
that.
great actress. Yeah.
I think so too. So that's kind of that plot line. So the last plot line is back at the prison. We find out that Glenn got off the bus, and he come across Tara,
Tara.
Tara, and Tara's like wants to stay there. She doesn't think she deserves to escape. After her joining the governor's crew, but Glenn gives her a second chance, and they escape the prison together. I think this goes to show how good of a person Glenn is, and how he he, I feel like, gives second chances more easily than like Rick would, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think when you take a look at Glenn's story, Glenn's made a lot of mistakes in his maturity from basically a kid onward. And so I think he has experienced grace from those who uh, had been around him. And so he's sharing that grace to Tara, who is um, messed up. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And but Glenn is still kind of recovering from the illness that he had.
Mm-hmm.
So he's really not able to fight off the walkers that they come across. So he passes out. So Tara has to fight them on her own, and I think she's pretty capable. I mean, I think she's still young, somewhat. I think I don't know how old she's supposed to be, but I think she can hold her own. She has like an Andrea type
She does.
personality and all that. Um, but so she fights off against the walkers, and then a truck pulls up, and it's Abraham, Eugene, and Rosita from the books. And I thought, like, out of everything I've seen from the show, or at least since season one, this felt like the most similar entrance of characters.
From the books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought they casted all three of them like perfectly, like how I would have imagined. So I thought that was a really good entrance for them.
I agree. I
Um,
agree. And I really like Abraham.
Now pairing them up with Glenn and Tara is interesting,
Yep.
but I think that made the most sense
Mm-hmm.
going into the next episode. But that's kind of like all the major plot lines from this episode. So, what were some spiritual themes?
Well, the title of the episode was Inmates. And so inmates refers, in my opinion, to the characters feeling trapped in their circumstances. So even though they're out of the prison, they're still imprisoned. And, they're in survival mode. They're not home. They don't have true freedom. They don't have true peace. So they're still inmates in their own ways, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is a very interesting title. You would think it could be a title when they were in prison, but
Mm-hmm.
they're looking for
No.
definitely more of a metaphor here.
Mm-hmm.
We already talked about the hope versus despair theme when we were talking about Beth and Daryl. I think Tyrese, his role as protector is significant,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Yeah.
is a protector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, despite all odds, we see this virtue of perseverance in Maggie. That's pretty significant. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's they're trying to find their way home again, and Terminus is this light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever part of the story that we're in.
Mm-hmm. So I would say this episode would probably be like the strongest overall of the three, because we had the most plot lines, and the most development between with all the storylines. It was nice to kind of see everyone else. Um, so I would give it a 9. I thought it was a pretty strong one.
Yeah, I'd say an 8 or 8.5.
Okay.
That was good.
Hmm. Okay, so let's jump into season 4, episode 11, called Claimed. It says Michonne and Carl bond during a supply run, and Abraham pledges to get Eugene to Washington, D.C. to meet with government officials. So, with my understanding, there were like 2 to 3 plot lines in this episode, but mostly it was going back and forth between the Rick in the house and then the Abraham's group and all of that. We did get some stuff with Michonne and Carl, though. We have them going on a run, and we have some bonding between them. And Michonne reveals her son's name was Andre. Um, they kind of play a game where Michonne's like, every room that we search, I'll tell you another thing about me. What do you think of this growing relationship
Yeah,
between them?
first of all, I really liked this episode. I thought it was very suspenseful with the
Mm-hmm.
Rick stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get into it in a second. But again, character development. I really see Michonne and Carl are developing this really neat mother son relationship, and Carl needs that, and all of this helps with his relationship with his father. And
Mm-hmm.
Michonne, this isn't the first episode we see this. This happened a while back when they visited home, right,
Yeah.
with Morgan and all that. So I think there's some really good stuff going on here with these characters.
Totally agree. I love their dynamic, and Michonne brings out something good in Carl, and I
Mm-hmm.
think Carl brings out something good in Michonne. So I think they bring out the best in each other. They're definitely laying groundwork for like a future family dynamic, whatever that looks like, with them and Rick, and hopefully Judith too. Um, so we have Rick sleeping upstairs when Michonne and Carl are gone, and then like this group of men enter the house, and they end up, two of them end up in the bedroom fighting, and then Rick goes under the bed, and then one of them gets knocked out, unconscious or something, like strangled. So then Rick has to stay under the bed, and then someone else gets on top of the bed. I mean, pretty like suspenseful stuff, but like not like really plot moving the plot forward, you know. It's one of those type of things. He does end up out from under the bed, and then he has to, and then he like is hiding a lot, and then he fights someone who's on the toilet, and then he escapes the house. So I mean, I thought it was all really well shot and like very suspenseful, but I mean, it didn't really advance the plot much, unless we do see some of these characters again, like the
Uh,
men.
and maybe we will. Um, my thought is that this part with Rick um, exposes this continued danger that lurks behind every tree in every house. There's another group, and they're not necessarily good guys, right? And so the danger's there, and Rick can never escape it. He never gets a break. When he's sleeping, he doesn't get the rest, and that is the world that they live in. There is no break.
Mm-hmm.
Danger is right there. So that whole theme I thought was really significant playing out in Rick's story there. Um, anyway, what do you think of that? Does that?
Yeah, I think so. He has to kill one of the guys, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and he's had to kill a lot of people, but you can just tell like each one he does like changes his character a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just the choices he has to make to protect him and his loved ones. It's hard stuff. So he does escape the house just as Michonne and Carl get back, and then the three of them, they're heading to Terminus now. They see a
Mm-hmm.
sign and they're gonna head that way.
Right.
So we have another group on that path. Um, but the other plot line we have is with Abraham's group and everything, and it starts off with Abraham telling Tara not to shoot a walker. He clearly doesn't think that she's tough enough to do that. And Abraham, throughout all of this, he's very like one note, kind of like just tough, like not really showing any emotions, you know, that type of character, which is very accurate to what he is in the books. There's this tension between him and Glenn. You know, Glenn insists that they go and search for Maggie, but Abraham insists that they go to Washington, D.C. He wants to get Eugene there to meet with government officials. And in the book, at least, Eugene's like full of crap. Like, that's not actually what he's doing. He's just full of it. So I don't know if that's what they're doing in the show too, but you pointed out that Eugene seems kind of sus,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And so I'm really shocked with Abraham's trust in Eugene. It seems to be like a blind trust that whatever Eugene is saying is true. And Abraham's all in on that. I don't know if Abraham's the smartest, knife in the drawer.
Mm-mm.
He definitely seems to be lacking a few things, and so therefore, Glenn, who's on a completely different mission to track down his wife, can't put up with this kind of obvious nonsense that's going on. And again, Glenn's not completely discounting the fact that maybe Eugene knows something, and Abraham having a good heart necessarily to try to save the world. That phrase came up over and over again in this episode. But
Mm-hmm.
Glenn's world is Maggie, and that's where he's at.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's conflict between Glenn and Abraham. They have a fight, right?
Yeah.
And Eugene um, does something pretty silly when the walkers come up. Why don't you explain
Yeah,
that?
he shoots at the gas tank. I don't know if that was an accident or if he
I
was
think
doing it on
so.
purpose.
I think it was an accident just because he's a doofus.
I mean, that was pretty funny.
It was.
I laughed at that, and Abraham was like, "What the heck, dude?" That was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
All of that. I mean, what I will say is that this whole dynamic was like hilarious. Like I think Abraham and Eugene. I mean, not really Rosita because she barely spoke, but she was wearing short shorts, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, I brought up that because I thought it was ridiculous. In a world of zombies in which a scratch from a zombie can turn you, right?
Hmm.
she's there in short shorts. Was that the way in the graphic novel?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so they're being faithful to it, but it is kind of silly.
yeah. But I like all the scenes. I thought it was like a pretty entertaining dynamic. So I
Agreed.
think the Abraham at all, he's going to be a good character, just like he was in the book.
Hmm.
So, um, and I think I don't know if the dynamic between Glenn and Tara would be entertaining enough, just them on their own. Maybe it could be, but I do think it's more fun or more entertaining with the added dynamic of Abraham and Eugene and Rosita. Would you
Right.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely brings some comic relief there because
Mm-hmm.
Glenn's pretty straight. I mean, he's not a funny dude. He's pretty
Mm-hmm.
straight. And Tara seems pretty emotional, fragile,
Mm-hmm.
and so Abraham, Eugene, Rosita bring definitely some lightheartedness to that story.
Yeah, for sure. And they abandon the truck and they're heading off there. Are they heading to DC or are they just following Glenn though? What did you get?
Either they're following Glenn.
Okay, so they're just going on a different route now.
Hmm.
I mean, they really can't drive the truck anymore after the gas tank was shot at.
Right.
So, but yeah. So, what do you say, like title and themes wise for this one?
So the title of the episode was called "Claimed," and I think that this has to do with the idea of like someone claims a possession or claims territory, it's mine, and so I think in that world, there's people are staking claim to the scarcity of resources. This is my house, this is my bed.
Mm-hmm.
There's that element there, and I think it's an interesting thing to think about. In a world where nobody really owns anything anymore, it's finders keepers, so to speak. First come, claim it, it's mine, until somebody else takes it from you.
Mm-hmm.
Those resources are valuable, uh, but it's different than what we're used to. Some themes: this idea of trust and skepticism, in that surfaces when we bring Abraham's group into the story. Like, can we really trust Eugene and Abraham? Are they real?
Mm-hmm.
Is Eugene really have answers for the government? And do we trust him, or are we skeptical? And like I said right away, I was pretty darn skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we have Rick in survival mode, and that idea of determination and resourcefulness. In this world, these virtues are important to survive. And then this idea of connection and healing, and we see that with Michonne in relationship growing with Carl, and how they're sharing is bringing healing to the relationship. And again, it's all this trauma that they each have accumulated. They're sharing and talking in the house as they're trying to find resources is actually healing some of that trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really beautiful to see because we both comment that these episodes, it's like more and more and more trauma on top of more trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and now we get a little bit of glimpse of healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I would say I give this episode an 8.5 or 9. What do you think?
I mean, I think maybe a little bit lower from the last one, and that's because it didn't really advance the plot a lot. But as an episode, it was good because we had like the suspenseful stuff with Rick, but we also had the lighthearted stuff with like Michonne and Carl, and then Abraham's group. So I thought it was a good balance. So I would say like an 8.5.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's jump into episode 12. It is called Still. Beth and Daryl share an evening bonding over peach schnapps and moonshine when the tension at the camp grows too stifling. So, I mean, I think was very mixed bag of an episode because as good as some of the scenes were with Beth and Daryl, I didn't think we needed a whole episode with them, and I thought it didn't really get really good until halfway through. I thought the overall premise of Beth wanting alcohol was fine. It made sense. I do think it was kind of a waste. Parts of it were, but really good moments too. That's why it was a mixed bag. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I would think there should have been another storyline interwoven in this.
Maybe
Maybe
like Tyree.
combining a couple of the episodes together into this
Hmm.
one. It felt slow and at times it didn't really advance the storyline forward at all. But I will say that some of the things end up being quite meaningful and impactful for these two characters by the end of the episode.
Hmm.
Again, we can always be critical of the writers and directors and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I think they did do something pretty cool with Daryl and Beth.
For sure. So Beth wants alcohol. Her father never let her have alcohol, which totally makes sense. Daryl doesn't really care at first about her. He probably just thinks that she's dumb for wanting it. He just doesn't really care all that much about her whole mission. But they do go to a country club, and that's kind of we had Beth really breaking down about everything with her father, like when she's holding the drink, and that was pretty meaningful. I thought, like she just probably was thinking about her father so much at that moment. And yeah, she just totally broke down. I thought the actress did a great job at that. I mean, both of them were really good in their acting in this episode. And this is when Daryl's like, "You need deserve better than peach schnapps," so he takes her somewhere else. But yeah, what do you think of that like initial breakdown from Beth, like when she's holding the drink?
Yeah, I mean, her father was an alcoholic, had problems with alcohol, so brought probably a lot of memories there. She thinks of it as a milestone for her to, have a drink, but it brings up a lot of memories. So
Hmm.
I know it's. I mean, I thought that was good. Again, slow,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was good.
Yeah. So Daryl takes Beth to a house. Now we did kind of wonder, was this Daryl's house? Possible. I probably am leaning towards not. It was just like somewhere he just maybe him and Merle like went to, or like something abandoned, or I don't know.
I think it resembled the house he grew up in
Hmm.
with whoever lived there was similar to his dad.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of triggers for
Hmm.
Daryl.
But probably not his actual house where he
Yeah, I
grew up
mean,
in.
probably not, but I
Hmm.
mean, I guess there's always a possibility
It
that
could be.
it could have been.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he knew right where it was, so it definitely had significance to him. Um, so she gets her drink then, and then the two play a game of Never Have I Ever, and it starts off kind of fine. Daryl doesn't really want to play, and then they get into a huge argument, and this is where all the tension comes up. He like says I didn't ask for or want attention by slicing my wrists or whatever. That was when she was trying to commit suicide, and that was a pretty low blow. I mean, he had no idea what she was going through back then. Would you agree?
yeah,
Um, and then he like drags her outside and like is trying to like force her to shoot a crossbow, but she doesn't want it at all. Like she knows that Daryl is spiraling. She really doesn't feel comfortable being around him at this moment. But it kind of goes into like a beautiful direction because Daryl says he wishes he killed the governor when he had the chance. He also says like you're a dumb college girl, and she says you're just don't care anymore. And she and I think Beth was overall in the right in this in everything she was saying. I was definitely on her side there. But then they hug, and it's kind of like a hesitant hug at first, but then it was definitely more meaningful. But I thought the actors did a great job. It was very well written. This entire scene. Would you agree?
yes,
Um, and afterwards, we have Daryl opening up to Beth about his struggles with Merle. And I feel like this is kind of where their relationship continues to take a turn for the better. We had them that scene with them fighting and then connecting, and now we have them sharing these deep conversations, and they're both drunk, or especially Beth's drunk. And she says, "You need to put your past behind you, or it will kill you." That was pretty meaningful too.
hmm
Um, and yeah, again, like this episode was a really good turning point for both of these characters. Daryl let go of his tough guy persona, which we've seen him all along, but also really opened up to someone for the first time, maybe
hmm
like ever. I think him and Carol were close, but we never saw them like this, like talking
right.
like this.
hmm
Um, I mean, you did bring up like she was kind of hitting on him, but I don't see that turning into an actual relationship.
No, no, no. She's too young for him, but I think she probably admires him.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, and then they burn down the house with all their alcohol, and then they flip it off before leaving. And that was like And if that was Daryl's house, that would have a lot of significance to him. Um,
Yeah,
and him like and Beth kind of doing it first, and then Daryl like doing it with her. It was all really good. I like that ending. Would you agree?
yeah. I mean, I think there was symbolism that the shack was a metaphor, and by burning it, they let go of their past,
Mm-hmm.
their pains and trauma, and they're moving forward. I don't
Yeah,
know. I thought that was nice symbolism and a turning point for both characters. I think.
yeah. We have like last episode we had Michonne and Carl starting that,
Yeah,
and now we have Beth and Daryl. I feel like they've all like those four characters made a lot of progress in these.
I would agree.
Um, so
And I
yeah.
agree. And I think, in just jumping a little bit, but I think that idea of vulnerability, sharing your hurts, your pains, your struggles, being honest and real, makes a big difference in healing. And you're right. Those four characters we've seen over these two episodes, we've seen that healing take place. And that's a beautiful thing. Great examples for us that
Hmm.
vulnerability is important.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would you say like the title and the themes for this episode?
Well, the title is called Still, and it signifies for Daryl and Beth a moment of stillness and reflection amidst the chaos that they're going through.
Hmm.
And that stillness is important. Um, Stillness, reflection, when we're still and we're honest and we reflect, it brings about vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to healing. And so much good stuff happened between Beth and Daryl in this episode. Um, Again, I think reflection brings about healing. There's hope and renewal, and forgiving others, forgiving yourself, accepting what's happened, accepting where we are. All of those elements bring about healing. And so there's a lot of good stuff in this episode. And for us, I think it's a great reminder of stillness. Being still is important. Be still
Yeah.
and know. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, I like this episode. And again, I think it was a mixed bag. I would say an eight, 8.5.
I was thinking eight.
Yeah.
Definitely the weakest of the three, but also really good. I would have liked it more if maybe I don't know, they put in like the Tyrese and plotline and Carol plotline, and then had
Mm-hmm.
this thing with Beth and Daryl. That's just me though.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have liked it more if that other plotline was good. But what I see you have some lingering questions pulled up. Do you want to run through those?
Yeah, I mean, so now we've ended 3 episodes. What are we thinking about
Yeah.
moving forward? Number one is, what is the true nature of Eugene's mission? Um, can Eugene and Abraham be trusted? Um,
Um,
I'm not quite certain, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I think yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're entertaining characters, but I don't think they're trustful characters by any means.
Yep.
So no, I don't think, and I think Eugene might be like the one hiding something, and Abraham might be like, because again, you said he's not the smartest, so he might have no idea. Eugene could just be tricking and manipulating him through all of
Yeah, and that's what
this.
I would be thinking.
Um,
Abraham is just again, it's just like a stereotype, like the dumb military person,
yeah,
which of course is never true, but it just comes across that
like
way.
he's like tough, but
He's
like,
tough, but
but
he's not really
no,
wise.
exactly.
Second question is, how would Rick's encounter with that hostile group that in that house, how will that affect his future decisions? Will this experience make him more cautious, make him more paranoid? He
Hmm.
can't even take a nap without somebody.
Yeah, I mean, they had this peace all the way up until then, and then now his own place he was in is like threatened again. Like they can never find peace. That's what it reminded me of. So I don't know what this means for Rick's character. It's going to be interesting. I definitely feel like he's going to continue to go down a dark path, though.
It's
He
yeah,
has to.
he's just all over the place, right? He's a
Hmm.
roller coaster.
Yeah,
That'd be interesting. What terminus? What is it called, terminus?
Terminus. Yeah,
Yeah, what that'll look like.
yeah.
And then the third question is, will Beth and Daryl's bond change their dynamic? How will their newfound understanding connection influence their survival strategies?
I mean, we'll see. I mean, if they make their way towards Terminus or not. I mean, it's possible they could have a romantic relationship, but I don't think so. Maybe she'll make a move on him. You never know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then I guess one that I didn't write down, but the one I'm thinking about just now is like, what is Terminus? Yeah, what
yeah.
is it going to be like?
I mean, I don't see it being. I mean, if it's going to be different from like Woodbury appeared very nice from the outside. I wonder if Terminus might be the opposite. Like it's going to look
Like,
very
will it look
bad.
rough and
Yeah, very rough. But maybe it'll be a good place, possibly. We'll have to wait and see what it ends up being. I assume we're going to see mostly everyone all coming together at the end, though.
yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
And with that, it seems like we've talked about it. There's always another bad guy. So they'll get into Terminus, and will there be another bad guy? That'd be
Hmm.
interesting. Before we close, just I think I want to mention that Herschel's influence is still strong
Hmm.
in the characters. His sacrifice for the group affected all the characters, impacted them,
Hmm.
and so I think we talk about moral compass. Who's going to be the next moral compass? I think Herschel still is the moral compass. His
Yeah.
legacy is helping the characters move forward. Not all of them are going to follow that leadership, but some of them will, and it's interesting to see how his influence will
Yeah.
continue in this group.
His influence through Maggie and Beth was especially prevalent in these episodes, in
Yep.
particular his daughters. That was very meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Beth. Beth was really good, like kind of following in that from Herschel.
Well, there's also that conversation between Glenn and Tara about Herschel,
Yeah.
and I thought that was Herschel. I mean, Glenn talking about his father-in-law
Yeah, he really respected him.
respected Herschel, and so
Yeah.
I think Glenn is impacted significantly by Herschel.
I definitely see Herschel having a big influence on him as well.
Yeah,
As with all the characters. I mean, characters maybe like Carol and Tyrese and Sasha and Bob like less so. Um, but I don't know. We'll see though. Is there anything else you want to say about these three
nope,
before
nope.
we
I'm looking
close?
forward to what's next.
Yeah, me too. So we'll be back next week to talk about episodes 13, 14, and 15, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone.
See ya.